Shadowrun Returns was one of the first RPGs to receive major funding on Kickstarter. The developers with the oh-so-glorious name of Harebrained Schemes have, with Shadowrun Returns, brought back this dormant science fiction meets fantasy universe in this new isometric, turn-based combat role-playing game. But the question here of course is, have they actually succeeded? Shadowrun Returns, of course, plays out in the Shadowrun universe. This near-future world contains all the cybernetics and technology as you would expect, but everything once considered mythological has reappeared, and magic is now commonplace, alongside advanced hacking techniques. Dwarven technomancers, troll mages, and elven street samurai all live among one another, without even so much as a chuckle in regard to their silly names. Shadowrun therefore is very intriguing and expensive, with much going on, and Shadowrun Returns does an excellent job at incorporating much of this universe while keeping it accessible to newcomers and explaining much of the lore along the way. The barely detailed 3D characters blend in well with the pre-rendered, painted 2D backgrounds, and although the aesthetics are unlikely to blow you away, it creates a potent atmosphere that is pleasant to look at. The story of Shadowrun Returns is called The Dead Man's Switch, a story about a murder mystery that plays out like detective work, but soon crosses over into some good old monster slaying. And prepare for lots and lots of text. The game features no voice acting, and you'll be reading a lot as the majority of this game is spent within dialogue. Luckily, the dialogue is well written, with characters fitting nicely with their representing portraits, and there are extensive dialogue trees you can follow to gather as much information as you wish. As you start your campaign, you'll first have to pick your characters, and you have much freedom in this regard. Race choices aren't very important, giving you minimal bonuses. For instance, as a dwarf, you have the possibility of gaining more willpower than other races, making you slightly more suited for the mage role. But in the end, they boil down to mostly aesthetic choices, and unfortunately, characters hardly ever seem to react to you depending on your race. Classes too aren't a major limitation, and although you can pick an archetype at the start, you can spend karma, your skill points, into whichever location you like. Though in the end, you are unlikely to utilize more than a small section of this vast tree. Shadowrun Returns then makes attempts at feeling like an open-world RPG, but you'll soon realize this is not at all the case, with a rather empty world and linear trail as you go from one mission into the next. Story choices are highly limited, making the game feel incredibly on rails, with very few side missions. Although there are a lot of dialogue choices, they do little to impact the story, and you are likely to get a very similar experience out of the Dead Man's Switch were you to do it a second time. Making my academic and kind elf shaman feel largely similar to if I were playing a street-savvy troll brute. Missions themselves play out in one of two ways. Either through combat, or through free running sections, where you can interact with characters and must solve puzzle-esque situations, which are amusing to go through and on occasion have multiple solutions. Combat missions are instead turn-based, and before you go into these, you must first sort out your Shadowrunner party. Here you have complete freedom in which Shadowrunners you'll pick, with plenty of options that all have different abilities and equipment. Sadly, they have no personalities to speak of and do not interact with you, with the exception of a few story-related sidekicks. Combat itself then has a good basis. It relies on a simple-to-use action point system with cover popping up as you would expect it to. The turns rotate from your party going first, followed by the actions of the enemy AI, and if you have the right abilities unlocked, you can often interact with the environment, in the form of critical leyline locations or summoning the spirits of fallen victims. In addition, you have quite a nice amount of abilities to choose from, with a good variation of spells, cybernetics, and equipment that can make for some solid combinations if used correctly. The fights then have enough tactical depth with a very limited amount of resources such as medpacks to go by, which is strengthened by the good overarching resource mechanics, making it a challenge to balance your karma and credits, as you are unlikely to be able to get everything you want, but allowing you to progress in whichever way you want. Buy a new pistol or rifle, opt for some spells instead, or maybe enhance your character with some cybernetics, which then come at the cost of your magical capabilities. You often do not have the money to get all you want. However, the main issue here is the rather underwhelming enemy AI. Although there are 4 difficulty settings that do beef up their statistics, the AI often hangs around in the open and plays carelessly, relying on a highly limited set of abilities, making them predictable and easy to defeat. In addition, there are no lootable corpses, and it isn't at all punishing. Where the game could have gained an extra level of dread, it skips out. If your Shadowrunner mercenaries die in combat, they are still fully available to you for the next mission. In addition, the decking characters, which plunge you into the so-called Matrix, end up being merely tedious. The Matrix is a Tron-like world where your technology experts can attempt to uncover hidden information, or more practically, turn automatic turrets upon their former owners. But this experience quickly falls on the repetitive, with very few abilities, poor sound effects, and little to no enemy variety, making it an unpleasant experience that you rather get over with quickly. Luckily, these sections are hardly ever necessary, and are, beyond a few story missions, all up to player choice. One strange complicating oversight is the complete lack of manual save system. If you do end up failing at the end of a long mission, prepare to redo the entire section from the start, as the game features an automatic save system which only saves upon first entering a zone. You can at no point manually save your game, which can be quite an annoyance. In the end though, Shadowrun Returns is a decently capable game, and most of all, it is a good start. It will be interesting to see where the game ends up in a year or so, as the game comes bundled with an editor, allowing for a lot of potential from the community, making Shadowrun Returns a game that is likely going to grow a lot over time. The current module, the Deadman Switch, is an okay experience, which is sadly awfully limiting in story decisions and suffers from many little oversights and rough flaws, making for an alright on-rails RPG experience. As such, the potential is definitely there, and what it currently contains will be entertaining and fun to go through for the RPG fan, but it isn't anything that will happily surprise you or amaze you in any way. Shadowrun Returns gets a 7 out of 10.